Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Hidden Benefits for Veterans. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that I want to wish all veterans and spouses and family members I guess, a good Memorial Day weekend, and to make sure that everybody thinks about that weekend as not just an extra day from work, but also an opportunity to sort of recall and thank all of the people that have provided service. So today, um, I began with a PowerPoint presentation that I kept on working on right until the strike of noon today. And for me, it is so important to sort of unpack as many elements as I can of the Veterans Administration, knowing that it is so large, so complex, but yet so vital and essential to our wartime vets, our non-wartime vets, our surviving spouses, dependents. There's just so much to unpack. And so I've probably put too much in the PowerPoint, but my preference is that at least if I'm not able to cover everything in our 45 minutes together, that you can at least have the PowerPoint as a discussion tool for you to actually look for additional resources. So we start with, again, at a very high level, just appreciating the Veterans Administration. And many people just think of it as one large administration, but in fact, there are three systems inside of the large VA. And it's important to keep in mind the three systems, because as we talk about different opportunities for support, you have to recall, which system am I working with? So we're going to talk about the idea of, you know, thinking about how do we get financial benefits? How do we get healthcare benefits? How do we get many of these things to actually support us through all different phases of our life? But today, to focus on, for the elder law piece of it, where do we get the most assistance for long-term care benefits? Next slide. And so when you think about how is it that, um, how do we have support elders that are veterans or surviving spouses or dependents? Why does knowing about this information, why is it absolutely so critical? Well, we have many clients who are coming to us with typical things that occur in aging, where they may have loss of independence, but some of them are looking at new diagnosis, or perhaps diagnoses that might have related to disability issues that occurred during their service as a vet, but that have, as they aged, become progressively more challenging. Maybe there has been a development where all of a sudden people are not as independent as they were, but they have care needs. Sometimes you might notice that there is a softening of capacity or memory issues. It may be that their care is just becoming overwhelming for a spouse or a child or family member. Maybe the overwhelm is not only the direct care, but the actual cost of long-term care. Or perhaps there may be a family member who has had a significant burden of worry that they've assumed to actually provide the care. If any of these situations sound like you in terms of a typical elder law situation, what I'm hoping is that you'll realize how important the VA is in terms of addressing those worries. And many families don't realize that under the VA healthcare and benefit system, that there may be things that they could already qualify for. There may be things that they could become eligible for, and to see those opportunities. And also to acknowledge that there are some vets who are reluctant to actually access the VA systems, because they feel like, let people that are truly needy access those resources. And what I would want to say to those vets is that please understand that there is a way for all of you to participate and make sure that everybody who is entitled to benefits actually gets them. So the goal for today is to really help families understand what the opportunities are, where the benefits are, who may qualify, and how to actually access these important resources. So again, high level understanding the Veterans Administration and that it's not just one big monolithic program. There are actually three systems. The VA has a health administration that is healthcare. The VA has benefits administration that are financial benefits that are tied to needing healthcare support. So it's confusing to many people, but you have to keep in mind as we talk through some of this content that there is the healthcare administration and then there's the benefits. There are the healthcare services and then there are the checks that can be issued on a monthly basis. The third program is the cemetery administration. So again, when you're looking for information, keep these three systems in mind so that you don't cross-pollinate the healthcare and the benefits, and that the burial and memorial ones are absolutely available and can be thought of as the third leg of a three-legged stool. So we're going to focus just at a very high level about what the Veterans Health Administration, what does that actually mean? Healthcare, the idea of accessing healthcare. Well, when you think about what happens in the community, you might fall and need to go to a hospital. You might then have to go see your primary care physician who might give you prescriptions, and you go to the pharmacy and actually use your Medicare Part D to pay, hopefully, for some of those prescriptions. Perhaps there may be a referral for PT or OT or other specialized services. At some point, the need for home health care, adult daycare, nursing home care. These are the kinds of things that are health care that are so broad that when you're not within the VA healthcare system, they are provided to you as a typical consumer in very fragmented ways. And to understand that this healthcare benefit, this healthcare access under certain conditions is extremely generous as long as you're qualifying. And many people don't realize that the VA may actually help support care along this continuum of care. The VA, the second system, again at a high level, the idea is that there may be a monthly check that's being paid. If somebody was injured during their service as a vet, they may be compensated, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. If we have a veteran or surviving spouse who actually had service during an active wartime period, that monthly check, that aid in attendance, is another financial benefit. It's confusing because in order to access these checks, the compensation and pension, there is a relationship to medical eligibility. And so while it doesn't relate to accessing, qualifying for the healthcare system, the continuum of care, you have to sort of get through the financial qualifications first. The other financial benefits that I'll just touch on very quickly, education benefits, housing grants or loans, life insurance, other things that are, again, very important to understand that the things that we talk about today are going to be very superficial and that there are many, many more things that you can look for. So let's look at the next third system, the National Cemetery Administration. So again, if you have interest in knowing when and who is potentially could benefit from being burial arrangements in national cemeteries, headstone markers, burial allowances, all sorts of things that relate to that particular need. That is a third system that we won't actually touch on today, other than to identify it and make sure that you're aware of it. So we call them hidden benefits that help pay for long-term care. And the question is are they really hidden? And I want to just sort of give a tip of the hat to the VA healthcare system in that they have two very accessible resources. One is the incredible website that, absolutely funnels consumers into the different programs, and I think a very helpful way. And then for those who are not actually on the internet, the actual calling of the VA, the Veterans Administration, the people that are answering their phones are really skilled at sort of triaging among the three different systems and actually connecting the consumer through those resources. And with without actually taking much more time, there are also veteran service organizations, VSOs, that exist in many areas and county. And the idea is that the VSOs are, again, an important way to find out about these hidden benefits. And of course, our firm as well, we can help support if you need additional resources. So when I think about our typical elder law clients who come in, we may be looking at their experiences along this continuum of care and trying to relate the needed safety nets of Medicare and Medicaid to help pay for care. But veterans benefits bring a whole new level of safety net in certain cases. And what's interesting about it is that many times the families don't understand where the Medicaid and Medicare safety nets relate to and how they may actually dovetail with the veterans benefits as well. There are also some misconceptions about how Medicare and Medicaid may actually work, and that's a topic for another day and another time. But just know that if you think that Medicare is actually going to pay for long-term care, that is a very common misconception, and that you need to really investigate where the boundaries are for Medicare to pay for long-term care, such as in a nursing home. Just to bottom line that, potentially you may have up to 100 days of skilled care in a nursing home. But beyond that, the safety net is not Medicare, but is Medicaid. And it's confusing because they sound so different. Medicaid is complicated, just as aid and attendance and Medicaid, they are intended to serve vets and surviving spouses that have very significant monthly costs. And the idea is that Medicaid is confusing and an important safety net, but vets who may qualify for both safety nets are a special category that require careful consideration. If we're going to actually be able to trigger the veterans benefits, what are we hoping for? We're hoping for access to the continuum of care under the healthcare system, or we may be trying to access one of the two ways to get a check through the VA related to long-term care. One of the things that is important is to recognize that many times people come to our elder law work with misconceptions. They believe that just because they've heard certain things, that there is not an opportunity to actually look at the VA systems, whether it's the healthcare system or the benefit system, in a way with fresh eyes to understand you may already be qualified, or we may be able to make you qualified. And one of the things that is very hard for people to keep straight is the difference between the compensation system, the check that comes in because you have an injury from your service, versus the aid and attendance, the pension check, which is not a pension because you had a certain number of years as a wartime vet, but because you actually have an economic situation where your income is consumed by unreimbursed medical expenses. And so sometimes people think, well, if I want to get that pension, the aid and attendance, I'm never going to qualify because I was never injured. Well, no, the injury related to the compensation program, not to the aid and attendance. This is the most common misconception that keeps our wartime vets from accessing the aid and attendance benefit. There is no requirement that you have been injured in order to receive the pension. So if you're a vet and that was never injured, never actually served in the arena, and sometimes you might not have ever been overseas for certain periods of war. The idea is that those are not requirements that are a barrier to you getting that pension check. It's not that you have had to establish any disability before getting the pension, or that the service wasn't recent. The idea is that if you are a person, a veteran who may actually qualify for aid and attendance, it's built to address all of these issues, and it's a common misconception. And don't miss the opportunity. So when is aid and attendance? What exactly is it going to help us with? It helps us with everything along the continuum of care. What does it mean to be on a continuum of care? Well, all of us have an aging plan. Our best hope is that we are completely independent until the night we spend our last dollar, and then we pass away in our sleep without ever needing care. The continuum of care is something more realistic that says you might need some support as you age, and perhaps it's some light home health care. Perhaps it's heavy home health care. Maybe you go to adult daycare for half a day or full day. Maybe you move to a personal care residence. Maybe you need to go from personal care, which is a residential model for residential care, to a nursing home. Or maybe you need hospice. So this continuum of care supports people as their level of independence fades. And whether it's relating to physical or cognitive issues, the idea is that you need more and more support, and you go through the continuum of care. Where the families are struggling is that they are not sure where the family member can be appropriately helped along this continuum. Sometimes families live too long without getting any care, or they get confused at the difference between personal care and nursing home care. And then families get confused because they don't know how to pay for this long-term care on the continuum of care. We're focusing on how does the VA help us pay for long-term care along the continuum of care. Next slide. And why is it that we want to make sure that we access the VA in terms of the compensation or the pension programs? Because long-term care along this continuum is incredibly expensive. I can't tell you how many times in a given year people come in and are so concerned about whether or not they're avoiding probate and whether they have a revocable living trust, as if that is the absolute critical issue to protecting their nest egg, only to miss the obvious real exposure to long-term care expenses, even if you become only partially disabled or partially up the continuum of care. So there are some people who need some home health care and don't realize it's $35 to $45 an hour for home health care to come in, non-medical home health care. And if we have a client who's using one-on-one home health care, we may be able to have live-in home health care arrangements or supplement what a spouse or child may be doing, but it can be $10,000, $20,000, $25,000 a month if they have that level of resources. Often they don't. So they may choose to go to personal care. But what's a personal care? An example of that in our area could be like a Sunrise Senior Living. And if you move to personal care, it looks like an apartment. And the idea is that you have a monthly cost, and the monthly cost can vary depending on whether you need tier one, tier two, tier three, and what are they doing among those tiers. They may be doing medication management. They may be doing some more support for you with bathing and helping with dressing. But at a certain point, the level of care isn't appropriate at personal care, and then you go to the nursing home or the memory care. Memory care can actually occur in either a Sunrise or personal care or in a nursing home. So it's very difficult to sort that out. But how many of my clients, when they're looking at these costs, would want to turn away $2,874 of tax-free money? Now, when I talk about clients that are willing to pay, $20,000 for home health care, those are not the ones where they may say the pension is going to be an important way to move the needle on being able to keep them home. How the VA pension, though, and this is the number of what a veteran who's married would get every month, this is a critical part if you want to stay home and you want to supplement what your spouse may be doing, or if you do want to move into a Sunrise and you don't want to dip into your assets as much, this tax-free money helps people stay in personal care and avoid the nursing home placement. There are different amounts of this monthly pension benefit that depend on whether you're single, you're married, and other categories. But again, for people that have long-term care insurance or large portfolios, the VA aid and attendance program may not be the safety net, but for many of our clients, this is an important safety net. Next slide. So how are you going to actually decide or know if you can actually qualify for aid and attendance? So there is active duty and discharge requirements, disability requirements, medical care requirements, financial requirements. And what I would say is that this looks overwhelming, but is actually just a very simple checklist. You should never have to pay anybody to get advice as to whether you would qualify for aid and attendance. So you have to have active a vet has to have served at least 90 days with 1 day during a recognized war period. What are the war periods? There's a chart that we can send you. It's also available online. And the idea is that these active wartime periods where when our veteran served at least 1 day in an active war period, they're meeting one of the check marks of our eligibility test. And that 1 day has to be attached to at least 90 days of service. Now, the discharge has to be honorable or other than dishonorable discharges. I am familiar with the process that can be used to sort of rehab discharge status. And so just know there may be an opportunity if you self-select and say, well, I can't do it because of my discharge status, just know that you may actually be able to revisit that discharge. There is a requirement that the person be disabled. Well, what's amazing is that if you're age 65 or older, you are presumed to be totally and permanently disabled for this eligibility requirement. That's sort of a very big barrier for many people under age 65, but not if you're age 65 or older, which is why elder law work can focus on this in such an important way. Now, there has to be, beyond this idea of being 65 or older in order to check the box for disability, there are medical care requirements. And the idea is that the medical care that's required is attached to an unreimbursed medical expense. So the idea is that not only do we have to be disabled and show the VA that there is a need for support with activities of daily living or that you need a protected environment or your eyesight. But these are things that are not only just medical conditions, but medical conditions that are producing unreimbursed medical expenses. What are unreimbursed medical expenses? On that other slide, when you're paying for home health care, when you're paying for adult daycare, when you're paying for personal care, those are things that are unreimbursed medical expenses. And how many times do you have income that's consumed by those unreimbursed medical expenses? Well, that is one of the most important financial requirements to actually access the pension. You have to be able to show that your income is consumed by your cost of care. And the VA wants to be able to support those veterans because of those monthly medical expenses. There's also under the pension program an idea that you are only allowed up to a certain amount of assets. The asset limit changes from year to year. It's actually tied to a similar number under Medicaid. For 2026, the net worth test is $163,699, $163,699. And so if your assets are above that, your countable assets, that could be that you have an IRA that is beyond that, or investments, or checking and savings and stocks. That is correct. You may have access that prevents you from actually accessing the aid and attendance benefit. But there are many people who have assets below that or who become below that in terms of different strategies so that they can access the aid and attendance. And we'll talk about those in a minute or two. There are some people who have their assets and a home. Just know that in 2018, the VA clarified a lot of the rules that related to the house. And so that if you own your house, it doesn't matter if you're at a personal care residence, the house could be empty. That wasn't always clear. But now, if you have a house that hasn't actually been sold, theoretically, you could qualify for the aid and attendance. A note of warning here, if you sell your home and you turn it into proceeds and assets, it may pop you off your financial eligibility. And beyond the scope of this short presentation, just know that if you do move to personal care with your home, there's special advice that you should be getting about how to evaluate the opportunities for aid and attendance and possibly using a trust. So in order to get on aid and attendance and get that $2,800, there's a checklist. And what I hope you hear is that many of you are already qualified and many of you may become qualified. Next slide. So where do people get stuck? The first thing is to make sure that you locate your discharge document, your DD-214. There were some records that were in a very large fire where some of the records about DD-214s are not available because they went in flames in the fire. So even if it's before you think you might ever need care, it makes sense to make sure that you get yourself or your parents document your discharge document. And again, if you think there's any opportunity to review your status of your discharge, you should be able to look at that. And just know that where else do people get stuck? People will file an application for aid and attendance and assume that there is actually a fixed amount of time that they should be able to get a response. What we see is that there, unlike Medicaid, which has a particular sequence, within a certain amount of time, you have some appeal rights. For the VA, it's not so predictable. We have had some applications for aid and attendance get turned around very quickly. Some of them have taken much longer. Both of them were identical in terms of how we organize our materials and submit them. There is a way to sort of expedite, and there's also a way to use legislators to actually make inquiries on your behalf if you have delays where you feel like, wait a minute, this has been sufficient time. You can also, make phone calls and actually look in terms of the status. Where other just to go back, yeah, the other opportunities where people get stuck is that they don't understand it's not what is your income as the only test. Just understand, is your income consumed by medical costs, and that there are opportunities for assets that beyond that 163. Again, also not documenting things properly can also cause the application to be delayed or even denied. So here's just a really simple case study that just gives you a way to apply the rules and sort of understand it a little more organically. So we have John and his wife have a total household income of $3,200 a month. And the idea is that 3,200 is more than the $2,874 number. But that's not the question. It's not whether the income is over 2,874. It's whether or not the $3,200 a month is being consumed every single month by these medical expenses. And so in certain cases, it's helpful when you have, for instance, a daughter, Sarah, who this is also typical, an adult child all of a sudden may have to work part-time, or they may actually stop working. They may actually move in with a parent. And the idea is that they're actually providing an important caregiving service. There is an economic value to that caregiving service. We said that hour of care was $35 an hour. If we pay Sarah something, and it doesn't even have to be the full $35 an hour, we will absolutely be able to appropriately pay her a reasonable amount for the care that she's providing. And when she gets that payment, you have an unreimbursed medical expense that consumes the parent's income that will trigger the 2874 as additional income to help the parents stay home. The proper documentation is the personal service contract for Sarah. It's not enough for Sarah just to provide the care. We have to establish the fair market value and have a personal service contract. When you submit something like that to the VA, they recognize that, they allow that family member to be compensated. That was one of the things that was also clarified in 2018. It does come with some, footnotes. The idea is that this is going to be taxable income for Sarah. There's no way to go retroactive for caregiving that's been done years before. There is a way to sort of file the application for aid and attendance and show prospectively and have that payment accrue. But that's different than saying, oh my goodness, I've lived with my parents for 5 years and I expect I can show you time records. That won't be possible to go. And then once you get your check, your entitlement to the aid and attendance, you have the key that gets you also into the VA healthcare system, which will become more important as we explain that to you. Next slide, yep. There are some families who we will dovetail not only the veterans check, monthly check, but also the opportunity to qualify for Medicaid. And again, Medicaid is very complex and beyond what we could talk about today, but there are some very typical issues that when you're dealing with an elder law attorney who actually is familiar with both sets of rules, they will be able to explain to you what happens. So again, if we give an example of a wartime vet who is at a Sunrise Senior Living, but has a tipping point where they have to move to a nursing home, that pension can follow them into the nursing home. And if we, have a Medicaid application that's submitted, perhaps even after undertaking some Medicaid planning, there is an opportunity in some cases for the wartime vet to keep the $90 and still be on Medicaid. When a single person is on Medicaid, all of their income goes towards the nursing home except for their insurance premium, a spouse allowance if there is one, and $60 a month. If we have a wartime vet who's in a nursing home and they're getting their $60 and they're a single person, they actually get an additional $90. That pension, that check turns into a $90 check. if we do have a wartime vet who's in a nursing home, that aid and attendance may actually benefit the spouse. So there are very interesting intersections of these rules. So be careful of pension poachers. The idea is that you have to know that where you get your information is really critically important. And I encourage you to make sure you're dealing with VSOs and the Veterans Administration. But also just know that pension poachers is a term that was developed by the VA to alert veterans that there are cottage industries or entire industries that were actually charging fees in order to see if you were qualified for any of these benefits, or it's improper for anyone to charge for the preparation of an application for aid and attendance, but instead that they were offering free services that were related to annuity planning. And so I think the thing that you would, if you're interested, you can actually look at the VA website. Again, the idea is to make sure that you're getting qualified advice. And elder law attorneys who are also accredited with the VA as accredited attorneys for the VA are also capable of coordinating the VA benefits. And the idea is that, next slide, that it's never too early or too late to plan. And just some of you are thinking, my goodness, I don't know how to actually get out of the situation that feels overwhelming because you're already in a very big crisis situation. Just know that even if somebody's already in a Sunrise or in a nursing home or at the hospital, it is possible to sort of break out the necessary steps so that you're using whatever safety nets make sense, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, or the VA, in a way to apply it. And never too early, meaning go get your DD 214. Make sure that you set up a strong financial power of attorney. Your estate planning documents, again, another topic for another day. What you have in terms of your estate plan makes a huge difference, and it starts with your financial power of attorney. And in the past month, I have had, I think, probably 3 cases that were derailed because people went on the internet and got DIY documents, including powers of attorney, that absolutely cut them off at their knees and had their planning come to a standstill. You have to actually understand that in Pennsylvania, the powers of attorney do not all look the same. And if you do not actually get one that's designed by an elder law attorney, you will not likely have content that will allow you to do any of the kinds of things that we'll talk about. And again, get organized. When you make a list of what your assets, what your income is, what your insurance is, who are your trusted advisors, you're helping the people that you trust to actually support you if something happens. So some of the other hidden benefits. We've spent a lot of time talking about aid and attendance, and I'm going to go through very quickly some of the issue spotting things I want you to know about. The next one, which is just as important as aid and attendance, is for our veterans who have injuries, rated injuries from their service. And the idea is that there is tax-free money to them that is potentially available. And the idea is that if you have a rated injury, what you need to know is that that rating, 2 important points, it is potentially, it's possible to actually improve your rating to try to get to that 100% rating. Why do we want to get to that 100% rating, which I think is our next slide? There's all kinds of things that are opportunities with the 100% rating. There are also really great opportunities if you don't get to 100%. Look for this slide afterwards and just spend some time. So if you do have a rated injury, understand, even though it may not be 100%, there are things that are listed there with the little red X's that you might actually be able to access. One of the things that is extremely important is, and it's not on this slide, but I think it's the prior slide, for 100% disability rating for our veterans, there is in Pennsylvania a real estate tax exemption. When you think about leveraging your service and you are 100% disability rated, this is something that you absolutely have to investigate and make sure that you access. And if you're, you go to the next slide if you'd like, and if you're not 100%, please understand that there is an opportunity to improve your rating. When you're looking for resources to review your rating and the opportunities to improve it, you can start with the VSO, Veteran Service Organization. And there are certain, Widener Law School also has a VA law clinic that does support vets for some sorts of appeals. And again, the idea is to really look critically, not only what has been in place maybe for many, many years, but look for the opportunities to even do better and leverage more. So when you think about how to get that rating up higher, perhaps the conditions worsened. Mobility, getting around has declined. You have increased pain. You might have cognitive decline that's measurable. The idea is that there are sort of presumptive conditions that may have been changed since you actually got rated, and there are other secondary conditions that can also relate or be tied to your medical condition and worsen. The idea is that you really want to make sure that you understand that this rating is fluid and not assume that it's one and done. Next slide. So one of the other unknown things is if you're familiar with hospice under Medicare, it's a one or the other approach. You can have therapeutic treatment until you elect for hospice, and then the hospice benefit is extremely generous and important, but you give up the therapeutic treatment. Hospice services under the VA can be concurrent. That is something that is not well understood, not applied uniformly. But again, one of the hidden benefits that I'll mention here, and if you need any more information, the VA, by answering the phone or just let us know if you are somebody that is evaluating hospice and potentially could be included in the VA healthcare system, this concurrent care is really incredibly important. Next slide. Again, these slides I'm going to actually just have to touch just by mentioning them in terms of whether you have Medicare wraparound as like a secondary coverage or health insurance through the VA. These two things are resources that could be their own hour. So I'll just mention that and go to the next slide very quickly. Survivor benefits. We talked a lot about aid and attendance and that wartime vet. There is a way for that pension to be reduced, but also be available for surviving spouse who actually may have, again, unreimbursed medical expenses that are consuming that spouse's income. Again, really important, even though it may not be a big check, it is a benefit that keeps somebody at the lower levels on the continuum of care. Next slide. This VA healthcare system, as important as it is to be able to get aid and attendance as one way to get into the VA healthcare system for access to care along the entire continuum of care, whether it's paying for home health care, adult daycare, personal care, nursing home, or access to the VA facilities and residential living. All of those things, you can be the person that's getting a check because you have a rated injury and you're being compensated, or you're in the pension program under aid and attendance. Just as another footnote, there is another pathway into the healthcare system, and there's some mention of it on our slide here. So if you understand how critically important the healthcare system is as opening the door to sort of many, many types of care, whether it's a check or actually service in different types of facilities and home health care, this is actually a critical slide to understand. It's not just the check you get, it's the VA healthcare system that you access when you actually are getting those checks. Next slide. And the idea of can a spouse get into the VA healthcare system? The VA healthcare system, in terms of actually providing the direct adult daycare, the direct extended care, things like that, those are reserved for the actual veteran, but there are absolutely ways where a spouse can receive support in the VA healthcare system. It's just not reciprocal in the same way. So again, to be able to discern what does the vet get, what does a surviving spouse get? Next slide. Caregiver support programs. There is incredible benefits that are so important that have nothing to do with money. The idea of understanding the role of the caregiver and making sure that they get training and an opportunity for respite and counseling, and the idea of the care coordination and how hard it is to actually take care of somebody. So just to know that the VA healthcare system and the VA pension, they recognize that the caregivers are an important resource, and they're looking to leverage that support with the resources that are available. Also, expensive things that you may be paying for out of pocket. When you're in the healthcare system, you also might be able to get durable medical equipment and different devices. So there are many types of things that are being paid for by families, not realizing that they could access it through the VA healthcare system. Next slide. And again, if you are accessing the healthcare system, this extended care, the idea of it's not just a check, it may be homemaker services or home healthcare aides or home-based primary care. The idea is to help the vets stay home longer. That's part of the healthcare system. That's extended care. Next slide. Adult daycare, respite care. Again, the idea is, and I can't say this enough, we have to take care of our caregivers, and by allowing adult daycare and respite care, we're leveraging the work of the one-on-one caregiver, and the VA really does a great job for that. Next slide. Home modification and grants. Again, accessing the healthcare system might mean that you might get help with the ramp, or having the bathroom become handicap accessible, or widening a doorway, making it possible for you to stay home. For those that are in the VA healthcare system, you're actually able to get that kind of support. If you're not in the VA healthcare system, there are pathways for those who are on Medicaid, in the community Medicaid, whole nother conversation. But again, just know that the elder law work is to figure out how do we flip the switches to get support for the families, and even if it's home modifications. So here's a case study. We have a wartime vet, a Vietnam vet, a spouse who's a caregiver. And the idea is they may come into a working appointment, assume that they just have to spend down to everything. But after proper planning, we may be able to help with veterans benefits. And if the person has, meets all of the checklist requirements that we have for the wartime service, and over age 65, and we can document the need for the care. And if we start with some home health care and actually help build the care plan with the family, we're able to actually activate that aid and attendance check that will be coming in. And then we will also be able to sort of look 2 steps ahead. And at a certain point, if we need to transition from aid and attendance to Medicaid, the elder law work will continue and support not only the continuum of care, but the different types of benefits. Next slide. So we have somebody, Mike, who's rated at 60%, and his spouse is overwhelmed, and they've just assumed that Mike is never going to be 100% disabled. With proper planning, that rating could be increased to 100%. All of a sudden, he is in the VA healthcare system in a much broader way based on that slide. We talked about the real estate tax exemption and some other important things. And the idea is that he will also have priority entrance to perhaps a VA residence. I have had more than one vet, if they were going to choose to be in a nursing home, their preference was to be surrounded by other vets with a higher male population. And the idea is that if you're 100% rated, you are now given priority. Next slide. Final takeaways: the VA is bigger than the families realize, more generous, I think is the other way to say this. Aid and attendance, you do not have to have an injury during your service. ratings and discharge can be actually looked at and reviewed. We do have to keep in mind when you're doing proper elder care planning to not just look at VA as the only safety net. We have to be able to coordinate it with Medicaid. And that is something that elder law attorneys that are accredited and also certified elder law attorneys, they're doing that work all the time. And to just understand that planning makes a difference. I think I have a few more slides, but rather than trying to take the last final moments, Allie, I just wanted to see, were there any questions inside of the chat?
No, we actually don't have any questions.
Well, the minute we sign off, I'm sure you'll have some questions. Feel free to reach out to us, and if you need any more information, please let us know. The final slide just gives you a way for you to reach out to us. And again, for all the vets that are listening, thank you so much for everything you've done. And if there's anything we can do to help you or your family, just let us know.
Yes, and if anybody does have questions afterwards, all you have to do is just email info@andersonelderlaw.com, and we'll be able to answer those questions for you. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone who joined today. We also want to invite you to our next webinar on June 25th. We'll be sending out an invitation for that shortly. We hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their afternoon and a happy and safe Memorial Day weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sally.